Welcome to the Back to Me podcast, where we help multicultural incoming freshman women and men manage their entire college experience throughout post-graduation to successfully transition into entrepreneurship and corporate workspaces as new hires.
Back to me. Oh, I turned it around. I'm back to me. I finally figured it out. I'm back to me. So when you think you have nothing, back to me. I go back to me. Yeah, I'm back to me.
Hello, everyone. It's your host, Yoli Tamu. Social emotional learning practices have primarily focused on improving emotional wellness in the classroom for secondary students. But fortunately, this week's guest has taken these practices one step further and co-created a guide to incorporating social emotional learning in the college classroom. Dr. Shevaun Stocker, psychology professor and associate dean of academic affairs at University of Wisconsin-Superior, joins us to discuss how she makes meaningful connections with her students through practices that they continue to use in their personal lives. Find out what tools will help you effectively respond to the ups and downs of this life. Enjoy. I was so fortunate to find our guest today, who is Dr. Shevaun Stocker. She is a social psychologist at the University of Wisconsin, and she's here to talk about SEL. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Oh, it's so good to have you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. And I have to say, it's a Superior Day here in Superior, Wisconsin. I'm at the Superior campus of the University of Wisconsin.
Uh-oh, I hear you. The Superior campus. That's right. Love that. Love that. Okay. So when we bring on our guests, we love to get a little background and just to, ask you how you even got into this field, as a social psychologist. So what inspired you to just, pursue and help young people?
So I went into undergrad knowing I wanted to study psychology and also knowing I didn't want to be a clinician. They are invaluable, amazing professionals that I have benefited from myself, but that is not a skill set that I have. I was fortunate in that I took several classes in undergraduate that allowed me to explore these other fields of psychology, including social psychology. And I found that my innate curiosity about humans was really well served from the perspective that social psychologists take in examining the situational influences on our thinking, feeling, and behaving. And so it's allowed me to have a career where I can study the everyday human experience and really understand kind of why it is we do kind of the daily, everyday things that we do.
I love it. I love it. So did you find that you connected it to you personally as well? Like you experienced some things, of course, in life, and this led you to this profession?
Absolutely. I think I both am fascinated by humans and sometimes confused by them, and including myself. And so studying social psychology allows me to look at the human experience through so many different perspectives. What is it in the immediate moment? What is it in our lived experience? What is it in the cultural norms and the society in which we're raised? How do this confluence of influences kind of shape who we are? And that's where looking at something like social emotional learning, how is it that we can have these habits of mind and these habits of action that allow us to respond to the ups and downs of life, from a non-clinical, non-therapeutic perspective. Again, I'm not a clinician. These are not therapeutic interventions, but they are practices that we can all enact on an everyday basis and can allow us to respond and adapt to the stressors and the changes in life that we're going to experience.
Mm-hmm. And so it's just good to hear that there are practices, there are strategies that can work for anyone, young and old, if they apply them.
Absolutely. And there's lots of different kinds of strategies because not every strategy resonates with every person or for every experience. You need a multitude of tools in your toolbox so that you can pull out just the right thing at the right time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The important thing is to have a toolbox. How about that?
Yes. Yep. That's what we try to build with this program.
I love it. And so when I discovered you, I saw that you and a partner wrote a manual about social emotional learning, and it was for higher education. That was the first time I had ever seen that. It's always K through 12. And wow, I was just so excited. And the fact that you said, yes, I'll jump on the podcast, I'm like, oh, it's just getting better. So, so you got to tell us, how did this come about that you knew that we needed SEL for higher education?
It's because I teach, right? I teach college students. In particular, I teach a statistics class for our psychology majors. And as you might imagine, not every undergraduate student learns that they have to take that class and does cartwheels in the hallway out of joy. And I have a lot of empathy for that because that's who I was. I was a junior learning I had to take a statistics class, and I was incredibly intimidated. Even though I was pretty good at math, I was very intimidated. I didn't know what it was. I was anxious and scared. And so I started teaching that class over a decade ago and saw that my students just had higher anxiety about being in that class than they did the other classes that they take with me. And so I looked around for things I could do as a non clinician to help my students have less anxiety. Because when our anxiety is up, our thinking is down. And so in a class like this, I need them to be at their optimal brain power. I need their thinking to be as crystal clear and as optimized as it can be. And as you said, there really wasn't much out there. And I am delighted and I'm thrilled that for the last 20 years, K-12 has put more and more emphasis on social emotional learning in the curriculum. I think that's fantastic. But you're right. Our need for social emotional capacity doesn't end when we turn 18. We need it as grown-ups too. And so my colleague and I, Dr. Crystal Gallagher at Teal College, we put together a package of about 15 activities, one for every week of the semester, that we deploy each week, and we do them with our students. And they're designed to be small, 5 to 10 minute interventions. You don't even necessarily do them every day, where you can tackle one of the 5 main dimensions of social emotional learning to kind of build your capacity, build your reservoir for managing and adapting to stressors and change in life as effectively as you can.
hmm And that means a lot that you're also a professor. So you're touching the students, you're hearing firsthand where they are, and you're applying it in your strategy. So I just thought that was amazing that you all were able to put a manual together and test it, right away
Yeah.
and get those results.
Yes. And so what we found is that we did this with a couple different classes over the years. We found that overall, after implementing it, students felt like they had better support and better resources to respond to the challenge of taking a complicated class like statistics. And we actually used it in other classes and found it to be effective in other courses. And so we put the manual together because we wanted a tool. We wanted the tool that we needed to be out there for other educators. And so it is just a step-by-step guide of how to use this in other disciplines, with other age groups, but it's meant to be used with adults and in a college setting where you aren't going to see this student for a whole year. You don't see them every day. You only access the student for brief periods, so it can be used in that way. And we hear from people all around the world that they're using. In fact, just this week, we had a faculty member in a nursing program talk to us about implementing it with their nursing students. So it's meant to be generalizable across any discipline. Really anybody should be able to use it. It's publicly accessible and it's not behind a paywall because we wanted to solve the problem that we had and make it available for others.
That's fantastic. The nursing industry is getting involved. That's great. It's definitely necessary. So now in your class of students, are there topics that are pretty popular with them, things that come up because you're going through this manual, you're going through your program? What comes up for some of your students?
I would say the things I hear them talk about the most gratitude and kind of gave them insight into things they didn't have. One is a topic we call making stress your friend, which sounds very contradictory. And we base it on a fantastic 15-minute TED Talk by Dr. Kelly McGonigal that is literally called Making Stress Your Friend. I recommend everybody watch it. She actually also has a book, and she's just got a lot out there, but her 15-minute TED Talk, Making Stress Your Friend, what she does is explain that stress doesn't have to be a problem, that there is a way of thinking about stressors as a way of motivating us and getting us to meet deadlines and to prioritize things in an effective manner. And that it's the way that we think about stress that has the potential to impact our health in either positive or negative ways. We always talk about stress as always being a problem, but that's really an unnuanced, kind of unsophisticated way of thinking about it. It really depends on how we are thinking about that stressor as something that's motivating us, that's making us rise up to meet a challenge. If we think about it that way, that can actually be a productive learning experience. So that's when my students are often kind of like, whoa, I've never thought about it this way before. And I hear them talking about that with each other. And it really helps them reframe kind of how they're thinking about things in their lives. And I think that's helpful. Also, we give them opportunities. There's an activity called Feeling Supported, where they're asked to reflect on the people in their lives that they feel supported by and what it is about those folks that helps them feel supported. And then we encourage them to reach out and talk to those people and just express, that they feel supported by them. And that often is a moment of connection on a topic that they've not talked about before. And that can usually improve their relationships between those individuals. We also have another activity called Meaningful Photos, where we ask them to identify 5 photos they've taken or to intentionally take a photo of something that's meaningful for them. And then, and this is the important part, you have to reflect on it. So a lot of these social emotional learning activities require you to do some reflection, and that makes you be self-aware, makes you think about, why is this a meaningful photo for me? What is it about what I've captured here that has that meaning for me? And it's that active cognition, that active reflection process is where we tend to see the benefit in our well-being. So it's not just that you have a photo somewhere on your camera roll, but it's that you're actively reflecting on it.
I love that. I love that. It's important that you're saying that because we hear about journaling a lot and not everybody journals. A lot of people don't take the time. But when you say a simple word is reflecting, that can happen in a few minutes.
Absolutely. And that's the point. These do not have to take up hours and hours of your day. And the other thing I want to say is these don't have to have a financial cost to them. Listen, I'm not above, taking myself to a new movie as a treat for myself and some self-care, but not everything you do around self-care has to have an expenditure. And so these are all activities that can be easily implemented into our complicated, busy, over responsibilities lives. They are meant to be workable. They're meant to be feasible. We really wanted things that didn't ask too much of our students, but would have a return on the investment. So if our students put a few minutes in every day in doing this activity, it really does tend to improve their well-being, lower their anxiety levels, and improve their cognition. So they're doing better in school because they're engaging in some of this social emotional learning.
This is fantastic. I mean, we hear about social emotional learning happening in schools, but I mean, like you said, it serves everyone. And there is a direct connection to mental health, social emotional learning. And, the public at large doesn't really know about SEL. So for you to be talking about this, you're preserving mental health of young people early. You know what I mean? And I'm just wondering, I hear the gratitude letter. That's fantastic. The reflections. Are there any other strategies that seem to appeal or stick out to your students that they're using to protect their mental health?
So another one is sometimes called a grounding activity or a focusing activity. And it's called 3 senses. And it asks you to sit quietly in an environment for a few minutes and just identify 3 things that you can sense. So it might be what you're seeing, it might be what you're smelling, it might be what you're hearing, but it's a way of being kind of very present in the moment with your environment. And it really is about kind of being mindful in the moment. And so most of these activities are based on some type of mindfulness, which many people think about in terms of meditation. And one of the activities is a meditative practice. But not everything in mindfulness has to be a meditative activity because that doesn't resonate with everybody. Again, it works fantastically for some people, myself included. But the whole point is that we're giving students exposure to an array of activities that tackle an array of different social emotional learning dimensions in the hope that at least a couple of them will be productive and useful for them. And I've heard from students they keep implementing them even when the semester's over. They finish the dreaded statistics class and they always do better than they think they will. And they get out of it and they realize that those were actually useful for them in other places. I had a student who was explaining they were at the post office at Christmas time, and it was really stressful because it was a little chaotic. The line was very long. They were kind of in a hurry. They could feel their blood pressure growing up. And so they started doing the three senses. And it just kind of helped them slow down a little bit, take a few deep breaths, and just kind of accept that, yep, going to be here for a few minutes. It's going to be okay. And they could just kind of, take their stress level down a little.
I love that. I love that. I'm so glad that you said that. It's not always about meditation, sitting still and trying to clear your mind. You know, sometimes it's just about observation, just what's happening. Just relax. I love that. I love that. This is such valuable information. I mean, America needs to really put this type of practice on the top of the list. You know what I mean? Because we're so distracted with social media and news and just negativity. Whereas if we took some time to focus inward more, we could get a lot of results. You know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely focusing inward. And also, when we do focus outward, it is with real connection. And so several of the activities give you opportunities to connect with a meaningful other and have kind of deeper or engaged conversation. Because we also know that, building strong, supportive social connections is a really important resource to our well-being. The lack of social connectedness is at the root of a lot of, difficulties that we're seeing people try to manage. And so I like that it's both about kind of building your own inward capacity, but also about kind of focusing on how you can be part of a community. And the community doesn't have to be big. If you have one or two close others who are your people, that's fine. You don't need 10 of them. I mean, who's got time for 10 people? Right. But if you've got a couple people who they've got your back, you're in this all together with them, that can be enough. And that's going to help folks when they need, that trusted person to be their sounding board.
hmm So would you agree that doing the inward work, the inward process should happen first because, there's a certain amount of aha moments, if you will, for the sake of a better word. There's a certain a matter of opportunities when those things pop up and you learn things about yourself so that you can communicate them with the people in your life. I feel like that's the goal, is to sit still with self so that you can be a better partner, friend, sibling, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little column A, a little column B. You're right. I do think doing some of the self work, and it is work. You might have to change some habits. You might have to plan your day a little bit differently. You might have to let go of some of the stories or some of the negative cognitions that you've kind of found yourself in a rut, stuck on. And so, yeah, you do need to do some of that work sometimes. But I think, when you think about it, when you do have those insights, and this happens to me all the time, I'm on a couple text chains with friends. You do that reflecting, you do that inner work, you have that insight, and then you want to share it,
Yes.
right? You want to go tell your people, oh my gosh, I just realized, I'm an avid reader, and I just in the last few weeks realized, oh, audiobooks. How have I not gotten into the audiobook
Right.
thing? I have a hobby where I use my hands a lot, so I can't be sitting reading. I'm listening to audiobooks while I do this. And it's been a blast. I'm pouring through all sorts of different genres of literature now for that. But as soon as I had that insight, my next thought was, oh, I got to tell my people. So I think it can kind of happen, in that what we'd call positive feedback loop, where you're doing the work on yourself, you're having some insights. And again, my example is sort of a silly one, but you're having those insights, and then it gives you a moment, an opportunity to connect with others and to share what you've learned about yourself with the people you care about.
Yeah. And I think that makes those conversations more substantial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, this has been great. My goodness. We're here. We're at the moment. And we always wrap up with these final words of encouragement. And man, like I said, we have these college listeners that are coming into college for the first time and dealing with that anxiety, as well as that college student heading out into the workforce. And so they're just seeking to just build, their reservoir of strategies. So do you have some final comments? Because this is really great.
What I would say is this: life will have ups and downs. when you're feeling anxious or uncertain, that is not actually an indicator that you're not good at something. It just might be new, or you might just be in a moment where you're tired and you're, stretched too thin. And so you're doubting yourself, but it's not actually an indicator that you're bad at it or don't have the capacity to get better at it. So I think it's important to always remember that, feelings of nervousness or anxiety are not really an indicator that you're doing anything wrong or you're bad at it. And that also having strong psychological well-being is not about eliminating all negativity in your life, because A, it's not possible. And B, that's not actually what, having good adjustment is about. Being strong in our psychological adjustment is about having the tools to effectively respond to things in our lives, both the ups and the downs. And so well-meaning people will sometimes say, oh, just don't stress about that. They have good intentions, but it's not about not having stressors in your life. It's really about having the capacity to respond effectively to them, both in the moment and over time. And so don't beat yourself up. If you're feeling nervous, if you've got some anxiety about what's happening, don't worry about that. That's not a signal that anything's wrong. And don't beat yourself up. Don't expect things to just always be positive all the time, because that's really not a achievable goal. And you're kind of setting yourself up for failure if that's the benchmark by which you're measuring yourself. Instead, think about, can I roll with the punches? Can I effectively adapt and respond? Sometimes it'll mean I'm feeling a little down or a little stressed out. But are those shorter in length? Are they recoverable? Can I bounce back from those things? It's really about the buoyancy. We call it being academically buoyant or psychologically buoyant. You can bounce up and down with those.
Right. This is great. Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Like I said, I was really grateful to to have your yes, to the podcast. And I'm glad that we can be your first podcast based on what you told me. How cool is that? So now if they want to learn about your manual, is there a website you can send them to or a way to contact you on IG or LinkedIn?
You can find the manual. It was published through the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. So we had a grant that supported the project. Again, it's applicable to anybody, but I am a psychology professor and it was supported by a teaching grant from that organization. So that's the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. They have a resources section of their website and you can find it right in there. I am not much on the social media networking apps. So you can find me at the UW Superior, University of Wisconsin Superior website, and you can get in touch, either give me a call or email me. I am not a Luddite, but I just don't have much of a presence.
Hey, you're busy working. That's why.
That's right.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much, Dr. Stocker. This was great.
Thank you so much. This was a blast.
All right. So you take care of yourself and I'll talk to you real soon.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us. Build your inward and outward capacity with your own personal toolbox of coping strategies and watch your life become more meaningful. For more information about other episodes, remember to subscribe to the Back to Me podcast, College and Beyond. I'm your host, Yoli Tamu. Leave a review at the end of this podcast, and if you would like to learn more about other special events, join the Back to Me podcast Facebook group, or simply text Back to Me to 833-206-4565. Until next time, be well.